Anyone knows what the three principal characteristics or criteria are for materials in general, I guess, when you're working with materials? No? All right, so we have three things, right? One is transparency. It's how much light the material lets through. Another one is glossiness, how shiny it is. And the other one is called refraction, which is how much light it bounces off of it, which is, you know, reflection. Think about it that way, right? And you know, we'll cover that in a minute. And so also important to note is that right now we're working, or I am on my screen right here on I am on a shaded view, right? Meaning that the colors that I see right here, these colors are the colors of what? The layers, right? Correct. That's the layered color right here. But you see that to the right, you have another column that says material, right? And you can assign a material that governs or controls all of those objects that are within that layer, right? So within layer number 2, I can click on this bubble and I can apply certain material qualities that would apply to any material that is within layer 2. Or vice versa, I can create a material that is not assigned to any layer, and I can discretely apply it to objects, meaning that I can be specific, and even faces, right? I can just apply it to certain faces, okay? So that's important to know, that when I go into render view, all of my colors are gone, because again, render view is rendering for us materials. And in this case, we just established we have no materials applied yet. We only have colors applied to the layers in which the objects are located. Okay, so regarding materials, the materials world lives right here on this section on the upper right corner, right, of the palettes right here. So you have properties, layers, and materials. If you click under materials right there, and you'll see how it's a little tube of paint, right? You'll see that we should have nothing there so far yet, unless you were, I think, Sebastian, you were working with materials, right? Yeah, and Dana was working, I think Idali was working on materials. You might have some materials there already. If you are not, you don't. But notice that we can add, right? So you go ahead and click on that plus right there. You get this add material. Notice that you have a set of standard materials, such as, well, I'll talk about custom in a minute, but you have gem, glass, metal, paint, picture, plaster, or plastic. These are all standard materials, right? So let's start with something maybe simple, such as, you know, start with glass right there. And notice that I click on it, and it brought in the material. Now it's part of my model, that material. I can add another one, right? I can add a metal. There we go. Now that's a metal material right there. I can add another one. I can bring a plastic, right? I'll bring a plastic right there. So I have created 3 materials right here. The first one being glass. It tells me right there the name. If I click on it, I have this window right here, these properties that I can change. I can be more specific in terms of this name. You know, this could be, for example, logo glass. I can name it like that. Notice that within the glass, I can change the color of it. Right. So now the glass has this green tint. And again, this is a material preview. You also have the clarity or frostedness of it, right? So that's a very frosted color versus a really clear one, right? So meaning that it's the transparency, right? So if you actually guys look at the back right here of the classroom, you have the glass, but you see that parts of it have this this film that actually not allows us to see all the way through. I'm not sure if technically that is frosted, but it's a film that has a frosting, right? And again, frosting, just think about it as a texture, and you might have felt it before. Let's say that you get on a work, right, and it's made out of glass, and it has this sanded, text on it, right? So that's frosted, or, I don't know, etched, right? The etched glass right there. If you can't touch it, right, it has this texture right there. Um, so anyway, those are some of the qualities. The IOR, that's just that's that's just a property that materials have, and that's how light bounces off of them. And you'll see that this is per material. Glass has a certain IOR, metal has a certain IOR, right? Liquids have a certain IOR, and that's why actually right here, if we click on this little tab right there, you can specify that IOR. But for the most part, you don't have to mess with it, right? You don't have to worry about it. Later on, maybe perhaps in more advanced rendering, you're trying to get a really specific effect. But you'll see that for the most part, the two main ones that you use are glass and water, and you'll see that glass and water have a different IOR. And again, that's just how. I'll come back to you on that exactly what it is, but it's just an effect that you get from light going through the material. So either it bounces or it distorts the light somehow. So we don't have to worry about that. And again, as I go through them, notice that I get different materials. So on the glass, I had clarity. If I click now on the metal, I have polish, raw versus polished. So I can make this really polished metal right here, and I can also give it a different color, right, to this metal. Color to this metal. There we go. Right, and I can create that right there. Bump texture. The bump texture, it's don't worry about the bump part right now. Just think about it as that it's a texture, right? So it has a hatch, cross hatch, dots, grid, leather, speckle. So again, I think there's many metal objects around us, right? But it could be something very polished, right? Such as this one right here, or other kinds of metals that have some sort of a texture, right? So they're kind of beaten, or they're kind of sanded or scratched, right? So, but again, if I put the hatch right there and it's super polished, well, we don't get to see that. It's only when I bring it to raw, right, that we get that different quality on the material. And right there is trying to render it right there. So it's taking a little bit, but it's processing it. Bring it like that. And the last one is a plastic that I brought in, right? The plastic has a reflectivity, right? Meaning that it can bounce off a lot of light or no light, right? So reflectivity to 0, it makes it a dull metal, plastic, I'm sorry. If I bring it all the way up, it makes it a really glossy, shiny plastic. So you see right there, the color looks like a bubble gum or something. You also have transparency. In this case, transparency is set all the way to 0. But if we want to make it a transparent plastic, I can by bringing up the transparency on this, right? And clarity, well, again, polished versus frosted. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a few materials. Go under your material tabs right there. Add. Let's do maybe how many? 3, 4 materials. And start with the ones that are already set for you there, right? So try a glass one, try a metal one, and try a plastic. And just for fun, at the end, let's do a plaster one as well. Plaster, and I'll do some sort of a almost white, very creamy looking plaster like that. Okay, and change their attributes, right? Change their properties. So a glass that is a certain color, and whether it's clear or frosted. A metal that is either rough or polished and with a certain color. Let's see, bring this a little bit right here. The plastic as well, and plaster. Let's create those 4, and I'll be walking around if if you have any questions. So that's something, you see that your screen is a little bit different than mine. I think for me, I find it a little bit easier if the materials are right here on the left, like I had them. So if you click on this tap right here, on this button, and you go all the way down, you have horizontal layout versus not horizontal layout, like, which is that right there. And you also have right there, you have the grid view, you have the list view, which they look like that, or you have the tree view, which looks like that. Okay, you know, again, just don't be thrown off. For me, it works better to have the grid view, not on a horizontal view. So like that. Okay, I was just walking around. I see that your screen looks a little bit different. So if you want to change it, that's how we can do that. All right. So we have 4 materials. You can have more. I mean, you can add more. Well, let's actually add more. Let's actually add more, but it's kind of limiting, right? Especially for us in the architecture world. What other materials would we might want to add for your projects? Huh? Wood, right? So wood. What else? Ceramic, tile. What else? Huh? Brick, right? All of these other materials, where are they? Well, they're there. It's just that they're a little bit hidden. Okay, so let me borrow your attention again, and we'll add some more. And again, just Javier had a good question right now. It's, again, you'll see that my thumbnails right here, the preview, it's somewhat a larger size than perhaps it is for you. And I mean these icons right here. So I just showed you how to change the view from horizontal to not horizontal, or the grid of the list. But if you keep going down to thumbnails right there, you see that it has these sizes right here: tiny, small, medium, and large. So tiny looks like that. Tiny, right? But I think I was on, for those of us that were visually challenged, right? Large is a nice size. And what else is there? You have right there show labels, which is nice too to see as well. So anyway, so let's add some more, right? So we have the glass, we have metal, we have plastic, we have plaster. So let's add another one. Click on the plus sign right there. Now let's go to import from material library, which is the first one, right? Which is the first button right there. Now you guys should have a screen that pops up that looks like this. Is that correct? The first folder should be, say, architectural, then ceramics. Yeah? Yeah? All right. Ceramics, environments. So there they are, right? Architectural, ceramics, default content, environmental, glass, metal, miscellaneous, organic, paint, pattern, plaster, plastic, preview content, product design, textile, textures, and wood. And for the most part, a lot of the materials that you'll be trying to find for your projects live within the architectural, no duh, right, folder. So if we double click on architectural, you have ceiling, you have exterior, you have floor, you have roof, you have wall, right? So let's say wall. Let's click on the wall, double click on wall. Then we have even more folders. Bricks, CMU. Anyone knows what CMU stands for? My technology students? Concrete masonry unit, right? Correct. So that's your not brick, but your blocks, right? Your cinder blocks, your huge ones. Well, huge, larger than brick. So that's your CMU, concrete, masonry, siding, stone, stucco, tile. So let's maybe click on brick. And then there's even more categories: English bond, Flemish bond, raking stretcher bond, running bond. That's just how they're lined up, right? And the pattern that they create, the brick. So pick one, English bond. Now open it. Now I'm looking at some of your guys' screen, and you guys should get a preview right here, right? On the icons. Yeah. I don't, unfortunately. There's something wrong with my laptop that I'm not able to see, but you guys should be able to see this same kind of preview in here. And if you don't, just go to view, which is this right here, and go to large icons. View large icons. View large icons, and that can help you pick. Since I cannot see, I'm just gonna pick gray and gray and red all brick wall. So I click on open, and it's loading. All right, and it doesn't seem to work. They work for you guys? So some of them are not working, but go ahead and bless you. Go ahead and bring in another 3 materials from that import from material library area right there. And again, under architectural, and you go to floor, you'll find wood, terrazzo, or ceramics. You can bring in tile from there. Exterior, you have stone, street, hardscape, or gravel. You have more wood, old outdoor wood. Okay, so we have brought in materials. Now let's look into how to apply them, okay, into your objects on Rhino. So again, if I go to my shaded view, you'll see that I basically only have 2 layers that I'm using. I have my purple layer and my blue layer, which is layer 2 and layer 3. Okay, so if I actually go to, so again, the easiest way that you can apply a material is to the layer. But remember, this is global. So what does it mean? If I go back to my render view, and again, I click on this little circle right next to, or if you click on this little circle right next to the layer 2 or one of your layers, and there's this drop-down menu right here, right on the top. So again, we look into the layer that we want to apply the material to. We click on the little circle right next to it. It brings this window up, and there's this drop-down menu right there on the top. Select one of the materials that you created, and you hit OK. Notice that it applies that material to all of the objects that are within that layer. Did it work? Yes. Okay. Now, that's good and all, but sometimes we don't want the material in every single object on that layer, right? So if you actually right-click on it and you go to remove material, that's how we undo that action, right? So actually remove the material so that we can actually do it per object kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to zoom into one of these objects that I have right here. Now, rather than doing the material right per layer, we can also do it per object. So if I select an object, select now one of your objects, go to the materials tab right here on the top right, and pick one of the materials. Right click on the material, and notice that there's certain options right here. The first one should be assigned to objects. The next one, it says assign to layers of objects, assign to layers, or select objects. Click on assign to objects, and it would only assign it to that particular one object. So go ahead and maybe now apply, different materials, to a few objects that you have maybe somewhere there. Yes? All right, so Idali is reading my mind. Right, so what if you actually want to apply different materials to different faces of the same object? So we talked about applying materials to one single layer. It's global. We apply now. Now we talked about adding material to one single object. But what if I now, let's say I want to do that face right there, only a certain material, and do this other face, another material? It's really simple, really. If you just use Control Shift and select that face, and you go to the material, and then you go again, assign to object. Right? Or I can pick, see this will be kind of interesting, right? So I can select those three right there. I can apply that color right there, and I can do all of these ones right here on the outside, like that. Right? Now this one has a transparency, so I don't want that. And clarity, let's bring that up. Oh, really? Yeah, so now I have like a lot of layers for like different kind of. Okay. So yeah, I just kind of like, since I wasn't coloring it, I was like, oh, well, this one. Yeah, no, I mean that's not a bad way of doing it. As a matter of fact, I think that might be even a better way of doing it, because you don't want to be clicking on each little face of things to change materials. That's not a very crafty way of doing things. I think you actually want to do what you did, which is creating different layers that represent different materials. The reality, though, is that we might sometimes we just get going with the project, and we don't really think about that in advance, and we don't do it. So that's why I'm kind of showing you how to kind of like go back and fix it. But good job, Natalia. There you go. And see, those are really good things to start doing, right? I mean, once you start realizing that there's a process to everything that we do, you start kind of looking into the future. You're like, oh wait, but I'm gonna have to have renderings out of this, right? So that means that I have to think about lighting, I have to think about the reflection of these materials, right? So you start looking into the future. So anyway, that's the way of doing it, right? So we use the direct selection tool, which is Control Shift and select the object right there. And again, we just do a right click and assign to object, and it does just that, right? It assigns that material to that particular object. So we can have multiple materials on one single object without exploiting it, without messing with it, right? So it's really good. It's a really good tool to use. Okay. So those are materials. Now remember, guys, what we have right here, what we're looking right now on my screen, that's a render preview. That's not the final rendering. That's a render preview. Okay. So how do we obtain the final rendering out of this? Well, we create a render, right? And how do we do that? Well, we hit on render. We click on render. Okay, so that's this blue sphere right here. So notice that there's two clicks, the left click and the right click. The left click does render and the right click does a toggle render settings. If you go ahead and click on the left button, a rendering should begin, and it's this window right here. Now this is the rendering window, and again, what the software is doing, it's computing all of the data that you have inserted right there. What kind of material it was, what kind of refraction, what kind of reflection, what kind of glossiness, what kind of transparency your material has, what kind of lighting your model has, and it's rendering. And by rendering, I mean it's coloring for you. All right. So based on how much data and how many different settings you had, both on your material and on your lighting, that's the longer that it's going to take, right? So on the bottom right here, it says a progress, which is not really that accurate. It says rendering, and it says 9% on mine, and then it says 8 minutes remaining, 7 minutes remaining, right? So I don't know. Start one from your computer, right? So set the view, right? Find a view where you're framing some of your objects, and begin a rendering. And let's see how long yours says that it will take. So mine's already been, not sure how long this has been, but it says that it's at 93% and it has about 19 seconds reminding, which these are the longest seconds ever, right? Because it doesn't really move that accurately. But you know, it's okay. I didn't need to wait for Ed, right, to start seeing some of the properties in this materials. So again, I have a different material right here on this face right here than what I have right here. These two glasses are the same, which is the green glass. I have the pink plastic both inside of this metal and inside of this cube right here, and on this form right there on the back. And I have this kind of beige on the outside faces of that cube right there. Okay, so the only thing is that while you're rendering, you cannot 3D model or you cannot access anything else within Rhino. So just have that in mind. What you have to do, it's either stop it, or actually that's it, stop it. Just again, like in this case, it wasn't done, so it gives you this line right there, this band. It just means that it wasn't done. But whenever you do let it run, like let it finish, I think some of you guys already have some that are done. Remember, the last part that we need to do, and it's important that you remember, you need to save the image, right? Save image as, and we click right there on that floppy, and just select your location, a name, and it will be a JPEG. A JPEG image, or if you want no background, PNG. Okay, so that is that. So I hit save. So remember, right? So whenever I'm asking you for now renderings, that means that you actually hit on the render button and that you actually save the rendering from the render machine, which is again this floppy disk right here. We save it and we find a location and we do all that good stuff right there. Okay, so I can close that, right? The rendering preview right there. And I can run as many renderings as we want. Now, as we do that, again, just remember that the properties matter in terms of the rendering time. If you click now with the right button on that blue sphere, it should bring this window up. Let's go ahead and look into this window because it's also important, right? So again, if you find your rendered icon right there, which has that blue sphere, and you do a right click on it, it brings this box right here. Everyone here on that menu? Yes? Yes, okay. So there's a number of settings on this window that are really important for us to be aware of. Actually, even before that, you don't have to close it, but I'm just gonna close this right here. Just know that the rendering size, okay, so it matters if you render from a view like that or if you render from it like this, right? It's a larger rendering if you actually render from a maximized window than you actually render from this little window right here. And I bring this up because one of the first things that is within this window right here is the view, right? So you can render the current view, a specific view, name view, or a snapshot, right? So right now it's under current view. The next big deal is the resolution and quality, and that's a big deal for us, the resolution and the quality. Okay, guys, so keep an eye on this, okay? So resolution and quality for me right now, it's a 664 times 371. Okay, 664 371. Okay, I'm gonna close this. I'm going to maximize this window right here. I'm gonna come back to the same one, right? Did those numbers change? Did you guys see that? So again, let me borrow your attention. Right? This is important. This is super important. Right? So I don't know if you guys can see that the dimensions of the resolution change if I am on a multi-view. So again, keep an eye on this number right here. Okay, where is this dimension? Or if I do that right there, right? That number increased. So that's a higher resolution because that's a higher window. Just think about watching a movie on your screen versus watching it, I don't know, at the movies, right? It has a much more higher resolution, right? I mean, the big screen, right? So the higher, the larger this, and it should actually even be bigger or larger with these screens that you guys have here on the computer lab, right? Because they're much bigger. So that's the dimension, and those are pixels. Without getting right now into what pixels are, just know that, well, the higher the resolution, the higher the quality of the image itself. Now you can change those pixels to inches right here. Now that tells you right there that this would generate a rendering that fits on an 18 by 10 inches size. And again, sometimes you might get from your instructors that they want a rendering a certain size, or that it should fit on a particular area, right? Your render needs to fit on a 24 by 36 or whatever, right? So those are important numbers for us, right? So for dimensions, you can always leave it as the viewport, and pixels or inches is fine. And then the next number that is important for us is the DPI, dots per inch. Okay, that should be, as a rule of thumb, for a final project, it should be about 300 for a final board, final project. For a test sprint, let's say that you do a 150, right? You're just trying to see how things are looking, but it's okay if it's not the highest quality. Or maybe you're just doing like a desk script. You just need something really quick, and that could be the 72, 75 that it has by default. All right. But rule of thumb, a 300 should give you a nice quality rendering. If the next setting it's also set correctly. Underneath it, you have a drop-down menu that it says low quality, draft quality, good quality, or final quality. You should also approach and use those accordingly, right? Let's say that you're working on your final board when you want a final quality render. You're working on, a mock-up presentation, maybe a good one works. A draft one for a draft presentation, or just a test print, or a low just to even see if the view is correct. You don't want to see the materials yet there, but you just want to see if the view is captured correctly. Okay, so those right there will highly and drastically affect. So if I go to a final one at a 300 and I set the viewport like that, let's say I do a custom one. Let's say that I do an 18, and I'm gonna lock the viewport right there, 18 by 10, and then I'm gonna hit render, but I'm not gonna wait for it. Let's just see how bad this gets. Right, so you see that the machine automatically starts kind of acting up, right? Slow to start. Again, I have some really high settings on the rendering preview, so it's processing right there, initializing, it says right there. I'm just waiting for it to give me an estimated rendering time, which it has not been able to do. So you can see how time consuming this is going to be. So again, this is where, at some point you would start your rendering, and then maybe you go to lunch, or you work on your model, right, your physical model, and you just leave your rendering going on. Although there's now other software that, some of you guys have been using that does the renderings much faster, right, and we don't have to wait for that. But anyway, so you see right now that it hasn't even given me an estimated time right there. That tells you how long this is going to take. It's going to take a really long time. And this is, again, just like Alfonso mentioned right now, this is where, again, having a fast machine definitely helps. The processor particularly, which I don't know. Maybe we should test the ones that we have here in school since they're kind of new. So I don't know. Start a good or a final. Oh, there it is. There's a line right there. Right? Oh, there's another chunk of the line. Oh my God, there it goes. Right? So you see that it's happening. Something is happening. So that's why you don't want to wait when you're not even sure if that's your final design, that's the final view. You know, you're good to go. You don't want to wait 10 hours for an image that it might take you 10 seconds to tell if it's right or wrong. Right? So that doesn't make sense. So you want to start from the lowest quality while working your way up, right, to a higher resolution image when you know for sure that you are done. Okay, so I'm going to stop this because I don't see any traces of it giving me an estimated time of rendering, but that's okay. I'm going to stop it. Hopefully it won't crash. And wait for it. Okay, there it is. So now it's stopped. I'm gonna exit. No. And then let me bring this down to a low quality 72 DPI.
What happens if we have a high DPI and the quality that doesn't match?
That's a good question. That's exactly what I was thinking right now. We'll have to find out. All right. So it still would give you what's called grain, right? It'll give you like some white noise if it's a high resolution with a low quality. I think with the high DPI with the low quality, right? Huh? A little bit, yes, or grainy. So let me start another one. So let's see. Let me do it. What was the 18 inches? Right, by 10. Now that's a 72 DPI and a low quality. Let's see if it'll give me a. So this one immediately started rendering. It gives me right here that it's gonna take 24 seconds versus the other one that it took us a couple of minutes actually that I was just talking and nothing was happening right there on the screen. Right? So that was all computing that was going on in the background. So again, this is but you can see, it's hard for you guys to see it from where you're sitting, right? But I'm starting to get a lot of noise, right? So there's a lot of grains that I was just talking to about right here with Natalia. Right? There's a lot of dots right there that it doesn't help it, doesn't make it look realistic, right? So that's that noise that I'm talking about. So that's what a low quality rendering starts looking like, right? So go ahead and test it right here on the computer right here. Maybe do one really low so you can see how it looks, and then run a really high one, and let's see maybe if it starts giving you an estimate. Okay, so let's do that real quick. So let me pause this guy right here. So that was materials. That was rendering. Additionally, right here within rendering, something else to bring up is the lighting, which is a good segue onto our next topic, which is lights. We have the sun, and you'll see how if you turn it on and off, it's going to bring this additional light source onto your file. Right? So by default, I think it's set to off. Right? And you also have this element right here that is called skylight. Right? That is on or off. And the skylight, just think about it this way. I mean, sometimes the sun is out, but we don't see it, right? It's just casted, but there's still light outside. That would be the skylight, the light that, it's not like the direct sunlight, versus the sun, that you see that it gives us those really hard shadows because the sun is actually hitting it, right? But we don't always need that either, right? So you can have a sun on or the skylight on and or off. And a lot of the time, sometimes when we start rendering, like, I don't know, let me see, can I start a rendering right there? And it starts looking very dark like that. It's because none of those lights were on, right? So this, for example, right here, this looks pretty bad. That right there, we cannot really see anything that is going on right there. Okay, so that's because our lights were off. well, the main lights, which are the sun and the skylight. Okay, so that's a great question, and that's a great introduction to our next topic, which is lights. So Noemi's question was, well, if I'm doing a rendering of a building and I want to get a view from the inside of the building, would you do it with the sun or the skylight? Well, I would actually maybe try both. But not only that, I would try adding lights inside of the building, which is what happens inside of buildings, right? I mean, if we turn off all the lights right here, even if it's daytime inside of this building, you turn off all the lights, it's really hard to see inside. Okay, so that brings us to our next area right here, which are lights. So if you click on lights right there, you see that we have only two lights, right? We have the sun and the skylight. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go ahead and close this over here as well. Now, I want you guys to do the following, okay? I want you guys to pick one of your logos, copy it to the side. We're going to create two layers. We're going to create one layer that is called light box, and we're going to create another layer that is called lights. I'm going to give these two different colors for the layers. All right, so I created a light box layer and I created a lights layer. Light box and lights layer. So I want to show you the 4 or 5 different, well, four main light components that Rhino has. And we're going to create some light boxes so that we can see how they work. And by light boxes, I mean like that photo booth that you guys have in Studio 3 right there down the hallway. There's a photo booth where you put your model inside and you take a photograph. That's what we're going to do, okay? So copy one of your models to the side right there. And then draw a box on top of it or on it. So what do I mean? Do something like this. All right, so we have a box. Oh, here, let me go into X-ray. So I have my model right there on the center, and then I drew a box right on top of it, so the object is concealed inside. So that would be right there, my light box. All right, so you see how there's my object, my logo in this case, is inside of that light box right there. I am going to use Control-Shift to select the front face of that box, and I'm going to delete it so that I end up with that right there. You guys see it? Let me change the color of this. There we go. There we go. So I have an object floating in space within a box that is missing the front face. I am going to copy that 4 times. Maybe 5, like that. So what we're trying to do is to test for different lightings right here. So I have these 4 boxes right here. So the first one that we're gonna test is the rectangular light, right? So notice that the rectangular light is just that, and it's this orange, right? It's a rectangle and it has an arrow. That arrow points to the direction of the light. The next ones that we're gonna test are the spotlights. Right? The spotlights look like that. They're a cone, and they work as a spotlight, right? Think of a movie theater, right, or a play. The next ones that we're gonna play with, they're called linear lighting. And think about LED strips, or kind of like these lights that we have right here on the studios, right? Linear lighting. And then the last one that we're gonna test, or almost last one, is the directional light. So just think of a cannon of light, where it's just kind of like play direct to someone. And then there's also the next one, which is the point light, which we'll talk about. Okay, so let me walk you through how to add those right here. So let's get on the lights layer and select rectangular light. Okay, now notice that it's asking for a rectangular light corner. So I click, and then it asks for rectangular line length. So I clicked, and now it's asking for the width, right? And I create that, and I have that light right there. So that was the rectangular light, and I'm gonna move it a little bit underneath like that, so you guys could see it a little bit better. All right, so go ahead and add rectangular light. So the next one is the spotlights, and for the spotlights, let's draw them from the top first. So if you click on create spotlight, notice that the first thing that it's asking you for is the base of the cone, right? So if we look at this other drawing right here, so the spotlights, they consist of the base, which is the opening, which is the spread, which is kind of like a radius, is a circle, and then the length of the cone, which is this length right here. Okay, so we want to draw first the base of the cone on a top view, right? So I go into the top view, I click for the base, I move my cursor to create the radius, right? I click again on my top view, and I move immediately onto my front view, and notice that I can now create the cone, right? I'm on this view right here, and notice that there's now a cone inside of my box right there. I can select it. Well, let's just draw another one on the opposite direction of it, right? So again, create a spotlight. Right, first create the radius of the spotlight, and then we go into the front view and we create sort of that right there. So for those of you that are ready, the next one is linear and then directional. So bringing some linear lights like I did right there, and then a directional while I walk around and assist. So now notice for the linear, I clicked inside of the box, right? It's not really on the top or on the side, you know. I just play with the linear quality of those lights, and then the fourth box is the directional, and then the fifth one will do an ambient light. All right, so again, we should have 5 boxes, one with a square rectangular light, the next one with spotlights, the third one with linear ones, the fourth one with directional light, and the third one, or the fifth one, I'm sorry, with a point light, right, which is that little dot right there. That again, if we zoom out, you know, we see those icons larger. Okay, now we're drawing this so that we can actually now take a look into our lights panel right here. So notice that we have our properties, we have our layers, we talked about materials up here. Somewhere to the right, you should have one that says lights. There, this lights right there. So it's this tab right there that says lights. Do you guys find it? Did I hear a no? All right, so if it's not there, right click on any of them right there and make sure that lights is on or checked. So right click on any of those tabs and then lights. Better? Yeah? Dana? Yeah? Got it? Got it? Got it? All right. So guess what, guys? So all of those lights right there that say unnamed, those are all the lights that we have on your file. Now notice that as you go through them, right, just click one by one, you'll see that the light that it belongs to, the name, gets highlighted yellow. You see? You guys see that? Right? And vice versa. If you click on a light that it's on the drawing space, it shadows right here, it bolds what light it corresponds to. Okay? Now, why is that important? Well, the first thing is that just like, and again, this might work better if I go to render mode right here. Whoa, that's a lot of light. But that's okay. So I'm going to turn off the skylight. Right? So just like I can turn off the skylight and the sun, I can actually turn off all of these lights right here. And notice that my model starts reading very differently. Right? So I turn off all of the lights right there. On that first one, I only have the rectangular one. On the next one, I'm turning the next spotlight. And the next spotlight as well. So you see how I ended up with so many lights right there together. Okay. Now notice that there's this number. If you double click on any of the lights, right? So I'm going to double click on this first one right here. Whoa. Notice that it brings me to this menu. I can actually change the color of the light, and I can also change its intensity if I don't want it to be that intense, and also the intensity of the shadow. So go ahead and have some fun with some of those lights right there. So go through your list of lights and give them perhaps different colors and different intensities. So we can start seeing how things are working, and then let's do a render setup right here so that the resolution is on a low quality or a draft quality at least, and we'll run a short render to see how different lights start working. Like okay, so now you have materials for the objects inside. You have lights. What happens now if you change the material of the box itself? What if I change that one right there to a super shiny metal so that I start getting maybe some reflections inside, right? So I'll bring that right there and I apply it. Assign to object, right? Or maybe this one right here. Apply it. Assign to object. Whoops. No render yet. What happens if this glass box right here, it's made out of glass? Got it, Antonio? Right, so add this right here, maybe glass right there, assign to object. What if this one is made up of, I don't know, maybe that right there, assign to object, and that one, another glass. And let's go to our lights, just keep having fun with those. Do some purple lights, pink lights.